I've gotten a lot of reps, and even on a short week like this, I've done it a lot. So I'm excited with the guys out there. I know we're uncertain on a lot of the guys who's going to be out there, but I'm built for this. This is what I've done my whole career, not knowing if I'm going to start up until the game time, to not knowing who's out there with me, to introducing myself to players while I'm calling a play type stuff. So, I'm excited.
That's Case Keenum, Browns quarterback. I made the argument today that if Baker Mayfield is a certain point below 100%, it makes sense to have him not play, even though he was talking as if it was his birthright to play, and he alone should decide when he doesn't play. Am I wrong there? You don't have to agree that I'm right about everything. But I was alarmed. I was alarmed by the stridence of his remarks on Tuesday, and he found out that ain't the way it's going to work, Baker. You're not able to play, and we'd rather have a 100% Case Keenum. And Case Keenum, he hasn't played well wire to wire in his career. He'd be a starter somewhere right now. But in 2017, when he was with Kevin Stefanski, he was spectacular in Minnesota as the understudy for Sam Bradford, took the team to the NFC Championship. And I thought that he would end up being not a star, but a week in and week out, year in and year out starter. And I remember thinking back then the Vikings should have just kept him instead of paying all that money for Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, well, they might have been better off if they had done that. I mean, Kirk Cousins has been good in certain points, and he's been bad in others. But Case Keenum, I remember a game in 2015 back when the Rams were still in St. Louis. And, Case Keenum had taken over for Nick Foles at that point, and Todd Gurley was a rookie. And it actually was the last game in the St. Louis, what was then known as the Edward Jones Dome, the ketchup and mustard bowl between the Rams and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Keenum played really, really well on that short week. And I think it kind of epitomizes what Case Keenum can be, right? If you need a guy to come in there and run the offense for you, make sure you're getting in and out of the huddle properly, make sure the ball is going to where it needs to go, I think that Case Keenum can do that for you on a couple of game basis. Like, that's what you really want from a backup quarterback, somebody who is a veteran, someone who can come in and have that steady hand and manage the game well. And I know people think of that as a dirty term, but especially as a backup quarterback, game management is huge. So I think that Keenum can definitely do that. The previous relationship with Kevin Stefanski certainly helps there. And, it's going to be tough for the Browns potentially without their two starting offensive tackles. Again, you may not have Odell Beckham Jr. as he's dealing with a shoulder injury. You won't have Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. Those guys are both out with calf injuries. But having said all of that, if you have a backup quarterback that's got to go play, this is the kind of backup quarterback that you want.
Yeah, and look, he led the Vikings to an 11-3 record as a starter in 2017. Now, the next year he was the full season starter for the Broncos, and he was 6-10, and then he was 1-7 in 8 starts with Washington in 2019. So he's been all over the place. He started his career starting 8 games in his second season with Houston and was 0-8. And I know wins, they say, aren't a quarterback stat. I think that under certain circumstances they are influenced by a quarterback's leadership and overall intangibles. But regardless, he's capable of playing well. And what he does well, and this is why I thought the Vikings should have kept him instead of Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins cannot extend the play laterally. Case Keenum can. And in 2017, we saw on multiple occasions, Keenum, when the walls would begin to close in, he'd go left or right, he'd reset, look down the field, and maybe move again, reset, and eventually somebody would be wide open. And the frustration was, and the reason why they moved toward Cousins, they believed that if Keenum would have just hung in the pocket a little bit longer, that guy would have popped open even sooner. But still, he got it done, and it was impressive. And you always have to assess quality of your backup at 100%, and expected performance of your starter at less than 100%. This was a no-brainer for me. And I know that there's contractual issues that come into play, and I know that Baker is very stubborn, and that quality in his personality is part of what has made him what he is, that very headstrong approach. And he's probably mad. He's probably seething about this, Myles. I can only imagine how upset Baker is based upon what he said yesterday, but this is the right thing for the team. I'm convinced of it.
I think so, too. Look, if he wants to be mad, then fantastic. Use that. And then once you're right and you're 100% healthy, go out there and kick some butt and earn the contract that the Browns probably want to give to him. But at this point, it's kind of hard to say, yeah, we want to pay you to be our franchise quarterback for years and years and years down the road, because he's shown this inconsistency over the course of this season. That's why you don't necessarily want to pay the QB that you drafted in the first round after 3 years if you don't have to, because you really want to see, all right, in this fourth year, am I sure? I'm sure. Right. And I think that it's kind of different when you're talking about somebody like Lamar Jackson down there in Baltimore. Yeah, they're sure. They know that's the guy that they want to build around for years and years because he's won an MVP award. He's taken them to the playoffs multiple times. But with Baker Mayfield, you just watch it. In some weeks, he's great. He was fantastic out here against the Chargers. But the week before that, against Minnesota, he was not. Right. This game that he played against the Cardinals. And yeah, I think the shoulder probably affected him some in the second half as he continued to play. Wasn't great there either before that injury happened. So you want to make sure, if you're Baker Mayfield, that you can be the consistent quarterback that will earn the paycheck through the second half of this season. And probably the best way for him to do that is to get healthy, even if he is seething that he can't play on Thursday night.
I think at some point what's going to develop in the NFL, and we're not quite there yet, when a guy who has been on the pass side of pass-fail as to whether he's a bust, a first-round quarterback who comes in and plays, and it's not so obvious that he's got to go, that he's gone, but you want to keep him, I think there's going to be a tier of quarterback contracts that falls below the top of the market. And Baker Mayfield may be the guy who's at the top of the second tier when it's all said and done. Stays in Cleveland, doesn't get $40 million a year, doesn't get $45 million a year or anywhere close to that, is in the $30 to $35 million per year range, which is not anywhere close to top of the market now. And I know there are quarterbacks out there making that currently, but they didn't negotiate their contracts that way. I'm talking about when the contract is done, because for a period of time, it was like every guy who was up for a contract, if he was on the pass side of pass-fail, he became the highest-paid player in NFL history by a little bit. Then the next guy, highest-paid player in NFL history by a little bit, just because he's not a bust, just because he's not a disaster. And I think that's got to end. And it should have ended with Jared Goff. It should have ended with Carson Wentz. And I still laugh about Andrew Berry, the GM of the Browns, saying in the offseason that those contracts aren't cautionary tales for them and Baker Mayfield. Yeah, yes, it is. Yes, it is. And the fact that Baker hasn't been paid sort of proves that they understand that they got to be careful, or they're going to end up sending a first-round pick to somebody along with Baker Mayfield's contract when they say, holy crap, why do we give this guy so much guaranteed money? So, hey, look, there's always a chance it's going to blow up in their faces like Dak Prescott or Kirk Cousins in Washington and Dallas, not respectively. I flipped it around. There's a chance that's going to happen. I'll take my chances, Miles. I don't want a Jared Goff or a Carson Wentz situation if I'm the Browns.
I don't either, and I think that Kirk Cousins and Baker Mayfield are probably good comps as quarterbacks, and how they perform, and there's sort of this inconsistency week in and week out. Dak, I think you pay him whatever and you're all right with it, especially with the way that he's been performing over the course of this season, coming off that ankle injury. Obviously, we'll have to see what happens with the calf, but I feel like he's in a different stratosphere, and he's earned everything he's gotten, and it's different than a Kirk Cousins. And I think you're right, though, that the Carson Wentz contract, the Jared Goff contract, they do serve as cautionary tales. I understand why Andrew Berry would not say that publicly, that's not the approach they want to take. But I think it's pretty clear that if the Browns were convinced that Baker Mayfield should be getting paid $40 million plus a year, that deal would probably be done by now. And I think that it would behoove the NFL as a whole, and I guess the teams more than the players, if that second tier of quarterbacks started to happen. And frankly, I can see the Browns doing it because even though they've paid some of their players, it's not like they paid like Nick Chubb, right? They didn't pay him astronomical, crazy money. They paid him for a running back that has been really, really good and is one of the best in the league when healthy. But I don't think that they overpaid him. And so I don't think that they want to overpay Baker Mayfield either. So it could be that they pay him in that second tier. And if that's something that, starts to exist, I'm going to be really interested to see how they handle this.
And they need to tread lightly because Baker is the kind of guy who I think will get upset. And currently, I would guess, is upset about the fact that he's not playing on Thursday night.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.